this person told me no. So you assign so much meaning to the word no. And what if when you heard no, what if you reframed that as, okay, this person either doesn't understand or it's not the right timing for them. They might be going through personal things that have nothing to do with you and it's not the right timing for them. Or it may not be that they're the right person for your team. And what if every time that you heard somebody said no, you never assigned a negative meaning to it, but you just were like, okay, one more person closer to my yes. Like if you knew for every 10 people that you reached out to, 9 people are going to tell you no, and one person will tell you yes. Then every single time you heard no, you're like, all right, one more person closer to my yes, one more person closer to my yes. Like you got excited about it because you knew it was a numbers game.
Welcome to the Kingdom Minded Mompreneur, where we, Becky
and Monique, your new biz besties, both busy moms just like you.
We're here to talk all things network marketing, mom life, and how to truly live out your calling. We'll be dropping 2 episodes each week to help you, the busy mompreneur, know the exact strategies to build both your business and your home. You'll hear each week from one of the top network marketers on their best tips for what's led to their success and what's working now.
We know that you're here because you are called to something more. You have a desire to succeed in both your business and at home, and we are going to teach you how. If you love what you hear here on the podcast and want to be one of our success stories, join us inside our community, the Kingdom Minded Mompreneur, where we provide a daily social media action plan, additional resources, kingdom coaching, and more. Click the show notes for the link to join. So let's get into the episode.
Hey friends, welcome back to another podcast episode. We are so excited to be coming to you guys today talking about how to avoid failure. Oh, this is something that I think we all struggle with. And it's kind of this big, heavy thing, especially in the direct sales industry and network marketing, because many people, I think, get really obsessed with, I don't want to fail. Like, what if it doesn't work? And we're going to talk about it today. So, Monique, what are your thoughts? Let's jump in. Failure.
Okay. Well, spoiler alert, but the way that you avoid failure is you lean into it. And you
Yes.
recognize that failure is not failure. Like every time in your mind that you perceived that you failed, what if instead of you telling yourself these stories of, I failed, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, what if instead you changed the narrative and the truth that you told yourself is this is just a step in the direction of where I want to go? Because I think what failure does, quote unquote failure, is it shows you what you don't want, or it shows you like, oh, this wasn't the way that it was supposed to be. I think of Thomas Edison and the light bulb and how, he quote unquote failed all of these times, but there's this famous quote of him saying, I really learned all the ways that it wasn't done correctly, like
Yes.
all the ways
Yeah.
that did not lead to the light bulb being created.
Right. Well, and like the Wright brothers, right? Like I'm sure people, learning to fly, I'm sure people are like, they're crazy. Here they go again, those 2 goofy brothers, jumping off a cliff or whatever, trying to figure out if they can fly. And that's exactly right. You can't look at failure as a final place. It's more of just this opportunity to learn and grow and evolve, and just almost like a checklist in a sense, like, okay, well, that didn't work. Like, let's go to the next try. Yeah. I think one of my favorite quotes when it comes to failure, it's Winston Churchill. And he says, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. So what should we tell the person who is like, that sounds great, like, yay, that sounds cool, but I'm getting stuck in my head, like I'm struggling to want to continue. right? Like, because that is the, I think, hardest part about failure is the overcoming the mindset that I'm a failure. Like, this isn't for me. Maybe, I should do something else, or, falling prey to the shiny object syndrome, where they're like, okay, this didn't work. Let me just go over here. Like, what do they do at that point?
Yeah, such a good question. So, as you were asking that, I kind of had this visual picture of, for a lot of you who are listening, your moms. And there was probably a moment, or there will be a moment, where you teach your child how to ride a bike. And if your child gets on the bike and they've had their training wheels and you've been beside them and, they've had this extra support, and then they finally get into a bigger bike without training wheels, and it's the first time that you push them down the street, down the sidewalk, and they fall over. So when they fall over, because it will happen, it's not a, if, it will happen. When they fall over, are you standing there as their mom, like, you're a terrible kid, you fell off your bike, you
I
can
hope
never ride
not.
a bike again, you're never going to learn how to ride a bike? No, eventually everyone learns how to ride a bike because you keep getting back up. And if little kids can have that, that boldness to say, all right, I'm going to get back up. Like, I remember, this is so funny. I remember when I was a kid learning how to ride my bike, and it was this exact situation. And there was this one part where there was a fire hydrant, and I had to kind of like the sidewalk kind of curved. And every time I would fall over, and this sweet woman who lived right in front of that house, she would come out, help me like brush my knees off. She's like, all right, get up. Like,
Oh,
I remember her name was Lisa. I remember I was like, 5, 6 years old.
yes.
And, she helped me and she encouraged me every time, like, you've got this, you can do this. So that is what I would tell someone is, you are that person and you're learning and you inevitably will fall.
Yes. Oh my word. Yeah, just recently actually Evelyn fell off her bike, and I remember, of course she still has training wheels, but it was, I don't know, like maybe the way her bike like the wheel hit like a rock or something, because there was a bunch of rocks in that area, so it just kind of like made her, fly off, like it just turned the wheel the wrong way. And I had this panic of, like, I knew that she was okay, because I was like, ah, I kind of screamed and like jumped, like, because I was riding on my bike too. And she did have a busted knee, like it was pretty bloody and everything, but she had a helmet on and she was okay. But my panic was not in that she was hurt, right? But my panic was that she wouldn't want to get back on. And, I kind of tried my best to maintain my composure, because I didn't want her to panic, right? Because the people around us panic when we do, especially our children and loved ones, they kind of feed into, or just in general, right? Like if you as a leader are panicking about something happening with your company, like maybe there's been some big change rollout and you start to panic, like it's contagious, right? Fire is catching. And so everyone's going to panic. And I remember just thinking, like, okay, stay calm, Becky. Like, I was kind of anxious and it was like blood was dripping down her leg. And I called my mom. I was like, hey, can you drive down here? Evelyn fell off her bike. I'm like, we need some band-aids and like paper towels and all this stuff. And the whole time she's just like sitting there, and this old man, came out, kind of like what you were talking about. Like he came out of his house that we were in front of, and he was like, "Oh, that's part of summer. This isn't going to be the last time it happens." Like he was just trying to be encouraging, I can tell. And Evelyn was like, "I'm never riding my bike again." It was just like, "I'm never da 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 da." And so it was kind of nice that I knew we were waiting on my mom, because we just kind of had a little bit of time to like for her to calm down. And by the time my mom got there, she had already said, because I kind of what this is like TMI, but I like wiped the blood on my own pants. I was like, you know what? Because she was like, I think I can walk my bike. And I was like, okay, that's fine. So we like start walking the bike back. And then she goes, well, I think it stopped bleeding. Like, I'll get on now. So I didn't like push it, but I was not, I was like, in my mind, I'm like, girl, you gonna get back on that bike eventually. Like I was like determined. And I was like, I asked her, I said, hey, do you want to try to get back on? Like, let's go ahead and get back on. Mimi's coming, but it'll be a minute. And she said, well, okay. And I think because I didn't make it like this scary thing, it was almost like this is part of it. This is going to happen. Like, as frustrating as it is to get a busted knee, it was just like almost, I hate to say it, but kind of normal, right? Like that things like this are going to happen. And it's not that we can't avoid it, right? I mean, like in life, like there's so many things we can't avoid. And so anyway, it's just when you were telling that story, it reminded me of Evelyn recently. And I was like,
Well,
oh
and
my
even
goodness.
your response to it, I think there's such a leadership lesson in that, in the way that we lead people, the way that we guide people, they're going to follow. And I think as leaders, this is one of the things I talk a lot about when it comes to leadership, is you have so much power to speak life into your team. Like the
Yes.
words that you say to your team, the encouragement that you give people collectively and individually, and just saying, I see you doing great things with this company. I see this paying off debt for you. I see this paying your mortgage. I see you blessing other people with this business. The more you speak those words of life and encouragement to your team, the more that they believe in
Mm,
themselves, and how you frame that failure. How you're the one that's, as a leader, you're the one that says, hey, it's okay. Like, you got told no, it's okay. Like, there are more people who need what it is that you have to offer. Keep going. And so those words of a leader, and I'm sure you and I both can think of times where like our upline said something really encouraging, or
hmm
we were frustrated and they were like, hey, this is part of it. You're talking about having a scraped knee. That is part of riding a bike. Like, that is part of
right.
life, is you will have a scraped knee. And so if you know that it's part of it, then you can speak that into your team. And I would love to hear also, Becky, what are your thoughts on preparing your team to understand that failure or being told no is part of getting started?
Yeah. Well, I think, a couple of things come to mind. The first is, right, like I think we've said this so many times, but it kind of starts with onboarding. So when someone joins your team and is trying on the business, quote unquote, you almost have to prep them almost, whether it's with statistics of, the 1 in 10 or 1 in 12 or whatever, conversation that, you're going to have to ask this many people before you'll get a yes, and kind of just preparing them, because then it's not a matter of surprise or frustration, but it's a matter of this was expected. And so when you create this like expectation, then there isn't a surprise. There isn't, this fear of whatever, like failure. There's not a paralyzation. People aren't going to become paralyzed because they hear the word no. They're going to say, oh, yeah, that's right. Monique told me this was going to happen. And so now that I've, it's like I didn't die, okay, cool. Moving on. Here's what I do next, right? I'm just going to put one foot in front of the other. And so I think that's kind of the first thing I would say is it starts with onboarding. But I also think, you know, recognizing what you want repeated, meaning when you are recognizing the action over the results. Now, yes, we want to reward people and like have incentives and fun, happy mail and all that kind of stuff for the people who do have these incredible results, right? If they're the number one recruiter, yes, love on them. If they're the number one seller, yes, love on them, give them all the things. But I do think something that really helped my team cultivate this culture of growth was not necessarily the results and like, oh, all these promotions, which did happen, right? But it was as a result of me constantly running like team challenges based on actions, right? So, we would always have this this challenge that I would run a couple times a year called the Big Ask Challenge or Just Ask Challenge. And every time someone would ask someone else about the business, it had to be about the business. Anytime they would ask someone about the business, they took a screenshot. And I always said, you obviously like mark out their name. Like you don't have to include that in the screenshot, but we want to see this conversation because a couple of things, right? It was a learning opportunity for those that didn't have the confidence to talk to other people about the business, and they could see what other people were saying, right? Like verbiage, different ideas on how to start the conversation or what to say. And I was recognizing someone simply for asking. And so I think when we kind of refrain where the focus is, it's more on the behavior, right? And if you think even about the most successful people, in life, right? If we think about the book Atomic Habits, it's not about the end result. Yes, you're going to get there, right? But it's about the habits, the habitual actions that lead to the success. That's where the focus should be. So I
Yeah.
think just kind of, as the leader, you setting the standard for what is expected, and that will lead to the results you want.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I think you have to have that conversation as a leader. When you're bringing somebody on, you tell them, hey, I remember we had interviewed Sarah Zalecki. She was an expert guest speaker in our community. It's been probably a year or so now, but we had her. And I remember her sharing that one of the things that she does when she onboards people is she tells them, you're going to have conversations with people who you think like, oh, this person's going to be really supportive. It might be your mom or your best friend or your sister or whatever. And they are going to tell you no. And you're going to have people tell you no time after time after time. And you have to know that going into this so that you're not surprised. You can come back and say, oh, Sarah told me, I'm going to have all these conversations and the majority of the people are going to say no. And I remember when I was with my first network marketing company, we were at a retreat, and the retreat, for part of the retreat, we went to the people who were number one in the company. We went to their house, and they were just kind of talking about leadership and doing a training at their home. And, all of us, when you're like still newer and you see these people who are at the top of the company, you always hang on to their words and stuff. And I remember they did this talk and it was so good. It was so powerful. The husband talked about how he said, okay, some of you might look at us and think like, oh, we have it all together. This is easy, whatever. And he said, of every single person in the company, he said, we, talking about him and his wife, we have been told no more times than any of you and anybody else in this entire company. He said, we have presented the business opportunity more times than anybody else in this company. And that is why they were number one, is because there wasn't this fear of being told no. And I'd love to even have this conversation because as you and I, Becky, have coached thousands of people, this is probably one of the things that for a lot of the women that we coach is a roadblock, is being told no. And this, like, something comes up where it's like, oh, this person told me no. So you assign so much meaning to the word no. And what if when you heard no, what if you reframed that as, okay, this person either doesn't understand or it's not the right timing for them. They might be going through personal things that have nothing to do with you and it's not the right timing for them. Or it may not be that they're the right person for your team. And what if every time that you heard somebody said no, you never assigned a negative meaning to it, but you just were like, okay, one more person closer to my yes. Like if you knew for every 10 people that you reached out to, 9 people are going to tell you no, and one person will tell you yes. Then every single time you heard no, you're like, all right, one more person closer to my yes, one more person closer to my yes. Like you got excited about it because you knew it was a numbers game.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think kind of like what you're saying, people make it about the no that they get. They make it about themselves, meaning that someone's saying no to me, like someone's saying no to you. When the reality is they're saying no to the business or the opportunity. And I think sometimes too, they hear that and it just makes them, like you said, it's just like paralyzes them. It makes them, obsess over like, maybe it's not for me or whatever. When the reality is some of those people that are telling you no, it's more of a no, not now instead of a no, not ever. And so I think continuing the conversation and asking those questions, just maybe like, depending on the person, right? Like, don't be obnoxious and be like, why not kind of thing. Don't ask that kind of question, but just saying like, hey, no problem. Thank you so much for, getting back to me. I would love to know, is this something that you would be interested in the future? And, or like, is that a no, not now or no, not ever, right? And just asking questions, because I think sometimes people will be surprised by the answer versus just stopping the conversation altogether. And who knows, if the way you leave that person after the no might determine if they join you later, right? Because if I did notice too early in my career, right? There wasn't as much confidence in what I was doing from other people, right? And then as I progressed and built this massive team, $8 million a year, and people were recognizing, the success that I had externally, then it became, okay, tell me a little bit about it now, right? And so it's not to say that you have to like achieve this massive thing before people will jump in with you, obviously, right? But I do think there are some people that they just need a little more evidence. They need a little bit more evidence of success and to see that you're going to stick with it. Is she going to still be here when, a year from now doing this thing? And so I think, yeah, just don't make it about you.
Yeah, well, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. Like if you've been someone who you're all over the place and you start something new and someone's like, let me kind of see how long you stay before they commit to what it is that you're offering, because, there could be some truth to that. Yeah, and I think that something that I feel like a lot of people struggle with in general is an all or nothing mindset, like a perfectionist mindset, an all or nothing mindset. Like I'm either gonna, do this perfectly or not at all. And I think you have to realize that business is messy and you just have to get used to that. And even like, we don't even have time today to go through all of our failures, but like even
Right?
just you and I, since we have been in business together, man, I think back on our time together, and sometimes I'll see like a time hop,
Yeah.
like a year, 2 years ago, or a year ago, or whatever, a reel that we were doing or something, and I'm like, oh, we're not doing that anymore, or whatever. And we've pivoted so many times in pursuit of, okay, what is the right thing? What's the right messaging? What's the right niche? Who is the right person? How are we helping this person? And so I think you're going to have that in your business. Like you're going to have things in your business where you may get distracted for a period of time. You might, maybe be speaking to a certain niche and then you're like, no, this isn't my right niche, or this isn't really connecting with the right kind of person. Like that's fine. That doesn't mean you failed. That just means you need to pivot and listen to what people are saying and keep moving on. Like don't assign a failure meaning to it and keep moving forward.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I think, success is on the same road as failure. It's just
Oh, that's good,
the
Becky.
people that achieve success are willing to keep going, right? It's
Yeah.
like, it's like when you're going to, I don't know, some kind of road trip, Disney, whatever, the beach, and eventually you'll get there, but you have to keep going. You have to keep going. And
Yeah.
you can stop at all these fun attractions along the way, but ultimately you have to get back in the car and you have to keep going, or you'll never get there.
Yeah. Well, I want to add one final thought. So, if you're listening to this podcast and you are in your business and you're like, you know what? I want to talk about the business. I want to share with people. I want to invite people, but I don't feel like I have accomplished anything. I don't feel like I can share with someone when I haven't achieved it. Okay, so I want to speak to you right now if you have told yourself that story. And what I want to encourage you with is you are not telling someone the final result. You're not leading someone to this place that you're like, I have achieved the thing, come to where I am. That is not the message. The message that you are here to bring to other people is you're inviting them on the journey. You are inviting them to join you. You see the destination and you're pointing them to the destination, but you're also on that journey. You haven't achieved it. You haven't arrived to the destination. And so sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm making $200 a month in my business. And so how in the world can I talk to someone about it? But if you know that you are meant for more, you know that you are going places, it's not about what you've already achieved. There are plenty of other testimonials you can bring in. You can get your upline to join you on a call. You can share other testimonials. Like you don't have to have achieved the thing, but you're inviting people in on that journey. Thanks so much for listening to the Kingdom Minded Mompreneur. If you loved what you heard today, could you stop and give us a 5-star rating and review? It helps our visibility on podcasting platforms so others like you can hear more of this message.
Also, if this episode encouraged you, we would love for you to pass it along to your own biz bestie and anyone else who could benefit. Lastly, don't forget that if you want to hang out with us just a little bit more, join us inside the Kingdom Minded Mompreneur community. Click the link in the show notes. Bye for now.